snacks, alcoholic beverages. It's always fun to get drunk on a boat.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's start our tour. Quick bit of audience participation. Raise your hand if you can see Big Ben. Congratulations guys, if you raise your hand, you are wrong. You cannot see Big Ben. What you can see is the Queen Elizabeth II clock tower. Big Ben is actually the name of the 13.5-ton bell inside the tower, so you cannot see it, you can only hear it. Now that bell was named after Sir Benjamin Hall. He was a very large man, almost 7 foot tall, about 3 foot wide, and weighing over 25 stone. And he was Chief Commissioner of Works for the bell. Now when his bell was completed, his workers had one look at him, one look at the bell, and they were so similarly shaped that the nickname has stuck for around 150 years. But that tower's name was changed to the Queen Elizabeth II clock tower in 2012. Before that, it was known only as the clock tower. Now that is attached to the new Palace of Westminster. That's that building on the right, known as the Houses of Parliament. Now, the reason why it's called the New Palace of Westminster, it is reasonably new. There was an old palace that burned down in 1834. This one was built in 1860 to replace it. And that burned down by complete accident. They were trying to destroy some old ballot sticks. They didn't want to disturb the neighbours, so they decided rather than doing it outside, they would do it in the heating system of the House of Lords. Very bad idea. The heating system overheated and burned down the entirety of the palace. 20,000 people ran to the scene, not to put out the flames, but just to cheer them on. Now, they redesigned it. It was completed in 1860. Charles Barry and Augustus Pugin designed it. And they designed it in a neo-Gothic style, so it looks older. Because of that, it has some very interesting engravings. If you look below the lower sets of below the upper sets of windows there, you can see all the coats of arms of the noble houses of England and Wales. And then below the lower sets, you can see engraved in Latin, that is the Lord's Prayer. And the purpose of that is actually to ward off evil spirits. Stop evil spirits entering the building. But I will let you decide if that is working or not, as I did think that was a job requirement to be in there. And in that set of steps there, you can see leading down to the water, that is Blackrod's steps. If you were accused of treason in the House of Parliament, you'd be marched down those steps, put onto a waiting waterman's boat, where a hooded figure would be waiting for you. He would happily sail you down the river to the Tower of London, where you would have your head removed. That is the same journey we're doing today, guys. Hopefully we'll all return with our heads still attached. But you can see the larger of the two towers there. That is the Queen Victoria Tower. It has the large flag on top. And that's where we store all the documents. British law. Some of them are centuries old, still written on goat skin. Interesting fact, you can't really see it today because the wind isn't blowing, but the flag on top of that tower is actually the size of a tennis court. Traditionally that flag was only pulled up when Parliament was in session, but I think it took so much effort to put it up and down that they just decided they're going to leave it up there. Can't really blame them. Now if you look to your left and your right, you can see two different bridges. You can see Lambeth Bridge on your right with the red stripe running across it, and then on the left you can see Westminster Bridge painted in green. Now this colour coding is quite significant because when we turn back around and you have a look at the House of Parliament, you can see that same colour coding is in effect. It's the division between the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Commons green, Lords red. And the reason for two different coloured bridges, traditionally, members of Lords and members of Commons weren't allowed to walk to work together, as if they spoke in the morning they would influence each other's decisions throughout the day. And this would lead to corruption. And then the tents, you can see them now, the red and the green. They are the lunch areas, the dining areas of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and they're still not allowed to share lunch, as apparently this will spread corruption. Seem to be very easily corruptible. Let's not go into that one. But once again, I will let you decide how well these measures are working, as, like I said, those tents lead into the dining areas and bars of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and that's actually the cheapest place to drink in Britain, as they do not pay tax on their alcoholic beverages. Very jealous. It's also the only bar in England where you're still allowed to smoke inside. You can hear I'm very bitter at all this. I've heard that some of the pints in there cost as little as 89 pence. But anyway, next to that building, if you look on the other side of the bridge to the left, you can see a black building, lots of chimneys. That is Portcullis House. That's the most expensive building ever paid for solely by the British taxpayer. That's because that building is flood-proof, fire-proof, bomb-proof, earthquake-proof, surveillance-proof. If you can prove it, it has been done. Unfortunately, not scandal-proof. I believe the average cost in a chair for a chair in that building ended up being £2,000. Try and work that one out. But that extension was needed. That's where most MPs will have their office space, as the House of Parliament is filled with too many important things, such as bars and restaurants. Heard rooms of a hair salon in the House of Parliament, and even a shooting range in the basement. Everything we need to run our country efficiently. Now, if you look to your right, you can see County Hall. This was once home to the GLC, or Greater London Council. They were the ruling body of London. They resided there from 1922 until 1986, where they were disbanded by Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher said it was because her government were far too... Margaret Thatcher said it was because they weren't doing any work in there, but Ken Livingstone insists it was because the GLC under his leadership were far too left-wing and opposed to a Conservative government. Either way, it was disbanded and it was sold to developers, and they made it home to the London Eyes ticket office. You can watch the 4D show in there after you finish on the boat. The London Dungeons, the London Aquarium, and my favourite part of that building is that someone decided it'd be a good idea to put a sushi restaurant directly above the aquarium. Great planning. Now ahead of us are the Golden Jubilee bridges. These are the white bridges, and despite their name, they weren't completed in the Golden Jubilee year of 2002. They were completed a year late in 2003. They found an unexploded bomb in the riverbed, left over from World War II, but they run alongside the older Hungerford Railway Bridge. You look where those bridges lead into on the left, it's the building of the two arches. That's number 1 Embankment Place, designed by a man called Terry Farrell. He completed that in 1992, and it was designed to look like something in particular. I used to ask people what they think it looks like. It's supposed to be a steam train. I don't ask that question anymore, because it used to be innocent answers. It used to be, looks like a toaster, looks like the top of Batman's head, looks like a Viking's helmet. But that was all ruined when a man came onto the boat and said it looked like his wife giving birth. Anyway, if you look on your right, you can see the South Bank Centre, the first feature of which is the Royal Festival Hall, built in 1951 for the Festival of Britain. Home to London's Philharmonic Orchestra, and the interesting fact which I've learnt recently, they've had to renovate all the seating. Apparently since 1951, the average size of the British bottom has increased so drastically, it can no longer fit in the chairs. And then next that is the Queen Elizabeth Hall and Purcell Room. It has that strange boat on top. It's actually an art installation which doubles as a hotel room for two. It'll cost you about £400 a night to stay in there, which is nothing compared to that building on our left. It has a green roof running all the way across the top and a single flag flying on top. That is the Savoy Hotel. To stay in their royal suite, it will set you back £10,000 a night. The last theatre of the South Bank Centre. If you look to your right, you can see our National Theatre, often confused for a multi-storey car park actually. That's because it was designed in the 1970s. They were a fan of something called brutalism. It was a style of architecture. Prince Charles actually once described that building as an ingenious way to sneak a nuclear power station into the centre of London. but it's much nicer on the inside. It has 3 different theatres, the largest being the Olivier Theatre, named after Sir Laurence Olivier, the first artistic director. You can watch performances there for as little as £15. It's one of the cheaper theatres which we have in London. On your right is the ITV studios, where we film many educational programmes in Britain, such as the Jeremy Kyle Show, The Voice, Loose Women. And then ahead of us to the right you can see a red brick building with a grey tower on top with the letters OXO. That is the OXO Tower. An interesting fact about this building, it's actually the greatest breach of advertising laws in London. We're on the river, this is a royal highway. To advertise here you need permission from the Queen. When the OXO company built their building in the 1920s, they did not seek permission from the royal family. Instead, they decided to build their tower and hire a very good lawyer. When they were brought to court and asked why did you put your company name on the river, why are you advertising stock cubes on royal waters, they said, doesn't actually spell OXO, we ordered random geometric shaped windows. They happened to come as a circle across and a circle, not an O, an X and an O. And they actually got away with that, which is why the building still stands, although it has become an iconic part of London. Coming up on the left is the Old City of London School for Boys. That's that building with a faded greenish grey roof. And it had some very interesting statues on it. There's a hidden one around the side of Sir Thomas More, you may be able to spot that. But then on the front, from left to right, you have 4 great British scholars. You have Sir Francis Bacon, William Shakespeare, John Milton, and the man with the ball is London's greatest scholar, the one, the only David Beckham. Terrible joke, and just checking that everyone is listening. That's actually Sir Isaac Newton carrying a globe. So we're about to go underneath the 2.5 Blackfriars bridges, and I will explain how we have half a bridge here in London. You can see these strange red columns which seem to serve absolutely no purpose. The truth is, it's an invisible bridge. It carries the Hogwarts Express to King's Cross St Pancras. You can only see it if you are a wizard. But what we tell all the muggles is that it's actually where the Dover-Chatham railway line used to run across. They decided to deconstruct that bridge because the diesel engine replaced the steam engine. Now, when they took the top of the bridge off, it got to the point of removing the columns, but they found that they were so firmly entrenched into the river they'd have to be dynamited out of place, which would destroy the road bridge and much of the embankment. So someone came up with an ingenious idea. If we paint them red, hopefully people will not notice they're there. Now, poking over the tops of the buildings to our left, you can see the dome of St Paul's Cathedral, standing at 365 feet high. This is Sir Christopher Wren's version, complete in 1710. It replaced the medieval version which burnt down in 1666, the Great Fire of London. Though when his version was completed, Sir Christopher Wren's, people were not happy with it because it's domed. People didn't like domed cathedrals. The previous one was steepled and they were expecting that, so it's actually hated for a long time. Now, Sir Christopher Wren is buried inside there, as long as many British heroes, including Lord Admiral Nelson, Duke of Wellington, Sir Alexander Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin. It has become a symbol of London. Winston Churchill actually used to call up every morning during World War II just to make sure it hasn't been destroyed, because he said if that fell, then so would the spirit of the people of London. Now, if you look on your right, you can see the only thatched roof building in London. It's a replica of William Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. The reason why it's the only thatched roof building, they are actually illegal. They were outlawed after the Great Fire. That's because, as you can guess, having a thatched roof is a massive fire hazard. The original Globe Theatre actually burnt down because someone fired a cannon off of the roof to signal the starting of the show. Clearly a bad idea. So they added a sprinkler system to the roof. The only non-traditionally constructed part of the building. But you can watch performances there now. Well, from April 23rd, Shakespeare's birthday, the theatre does open up. The original would have stood on our right, where the Financial Times building is. And Shakespeare and actors would have got changed where that pub now stands, the Anchor. And that's because that's one side of the Bankside's Tavern. But the Anchor is filled with history. That's a very old pub, built in 1615. It's actually Charles Dickens' local pub. Now, it's appeared in many different films. You actually see it in the end of Mission Impossible 2. We see Tom Cruise sitting on a pint, more likely a half pint, as he is a very tiny man. Now, if you look between the gaps of building on your right, you can see Sir Francis Drake's Golden Hind. In 1577, he became the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe. And he had a great time doing so, because he robbed every single Spanish and Portuguese trading vessel which he saw on the way. He returned with £25 million worth of gold and silver and donated that money to the crown, which earned him a knighthood. That replica has circled the globe twice, once more than the original, though this time we did not rob any Spanish and Portuguese. Now, some of you may have just spotted this, point to London Bridge. It's actually the bridge where we've just gone under. You can see carpet on your left and right. Often confuses people, even Google Images gets that wrong. Bridge ahead of us is Tower Bridge. I will explain that on the way back. Because on our left is the most exciting building in British history. That building on the waterfront there with all the windows. Every year people gather from all corners of the country to watch the most exciting competition we have to offer. All corners of the country to watch or take part in the one, the only, National Window Cleaning Association's competition. Grab your tickets now, guys. I'm sure they sell out very fast. And you can see ahead of us on the right, just coming up to it now, the HMS Belfast, an 11,500 ton cruiser, the largest lightweight cruiser of the British fleet during World War II.